Yeah.
Hello everybody. My name is Jim. My last name is Zheng Chang. Yeah, and one of the member in Beyond Android team. I've done some work related to the validation. Yeah. I'm working on some part for support Android on Lava. Yeah. Okay, so today the topic is Android continuous integration building, and I'll just make a start to talk some topics about this session. And if you have any idea or topic to discuss, welcome just give me the feedback or let's discuss anytime. Okay, so let me to say something about the background. Okay, so now for now we in our Android team we are going to make Android LED. In our evaluation view. Basically, we want to make Android LED be as generic as we can to make it generic. But we would like to also LED support more and more development board. Yeah. For now, we have support on Panda and Big OSM. Yeah. And we also would like to fully enable the hardware acceleration function. We like to enable fully enable the hardware function, like graphic acceleration and multimedia hardware DSP acceleration and like overlay and so on. So there are many sources around for the whole Android source tree. For the mainline upstream, that we have the AOSP. That is the so-called Google Android open source code. Yeah, and maybe some company has early access to get the code from Google. Yeah, but this part may be more like a secret. Yeah. Okay. And for Milano, we would like to track the latest code as we can. So we have our own Linux Android kernel tree, yeah, it's John maintaining the kernel, the Linux Android kernel tree. Yeah, and there are also other open source Android tree like Robot to support the Big Boys and the Panda, the Pandroid open source project. And we may also maintain the U-boot and the toolchain to enhance the whole Android distribution. Yeah, and there are also we may need the proprietary binary files from the landing team to support the hardware acceleration well. Okay, so now we should have I think it's very basic that we are doing the development, and there will be like a cycle that we do developer and build and the deployment that to the target and doing the test. Yeah. So if test is very important. Yeah. Let's make sure we can keep running the cycle. Keep doing the development. Keep doing development. Sometimes we will do like a merge stuff, doing a merge or doing integration. Yeah. So after done some merge or integration, would like to test if our merge is no problem, and the view, the output of the view, the image can work. Yeah. And no regression happen.
So this is on follow-up to, after code review using possibly Garrett, then we do test merges and then run a subset of the validation, the large set validation tests. So we'll have the validation tests that run 24, 48, 72 hours, or even longer, and then there'll be a subset of those that will smoke test the merge results. So that's what we're talking about, and those things will happen continually. That's continuous integration.
So it happens that we will have many need to make a view. Right now we have another Android view service which is use the Jenkins system, and it's use the Amazon EC2 service. Yeah, and the view service is also a project. It's called Linano Cloud Build Team. Okay. So here is a wiki link reference for reference. Yeah, and we use this view service to make a daily view, and sometimes we also would like to make a specific view for testing before we push a commit. We can make a specific test view before to make sure our commit is no problem. Yeah, and we also would like to make a view based on every commit push. Yeah, so this is just like the view bar project doing that. There will be many views, and for each commit push, there will be view. There will be view trigger. So there are many views, and after each view, there may be some test for test run to make sure the view is to see the result for each view.
So one of the action items we have out of this is to actually add an interface, and we have a couple of action items. Well, the first one, of course, is which tests are we going to run, and the second thing is how do we easily add tests to this framework? Is it going to be this is all the tests that we have, and you check mark them, or it's got to be easy to upload these continuous integration tests, because this is where everything falls down typically. You set up this big, huge infrastructure, and then it becomes a pain to actually add the unit test, and then it slows things down, and it becomes inflexible and things like that. So that's getting that user story worked out is going to be important, because if we can easily add and remove tests, then we'll have a much more successful continuous integration loop than if that becomes hard.
So this is a pretty static set of tests you're going to want to run on each of these builds for continuous integration testing, right?
Well, static in which way?
You're not going to suddenly for this build that just happened today, you're not going to want to run 6 different new tests and delete the 30 that you ran last time, for instance. It's going to stay the same.
It's going to stay relatively the same, plus or minus 3 or 4 tests.
Right, but when you change it, it's going to be, you're changing it from this point forward. It's not.
Yes, yeah.
Like
so the other action item is record. So for every run, record the tests that were successfully run.
Right. So I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward. I mean, just to give you an example, we right now we're running daily test runs of the Oneiric images,
right,
using Lava. And the way I'm doing it right now is going out and finding the latest images and pulling them. This would be a slightly different way. You know, this is something we're looking at doing. There's a session later today about this. Also, doing this in general in Lava is supporting having systems that can send it an event and say, hey, I've got this new image. Do something with it.
Right.
And it would have a rule to say, okay, this is what I want to do with that. And basically, it would do the same thing that I'm doing now, which is take a template, which is these are all the tests, the actions that we want to take, to deploy the tests that we want to run, and all of that. And it would basically fill in the blanks with a new image, where to get the new image, and then push that to Lava to run.
Okay.
So if you did ever want to change the set of tests that you're running, all you would need to do is change that template to just working off of.
Okay. So then even a further thing is, and this is something that I think we can, if we implement this, it'll be very useful. Mm-hmm. And we'll take this slight diversion and we'll get back to the main line, but is to actually be able to support kind of interactive development. So where I'm actually hacking on a build necessarily, and I want to actually then say, okay, I want to submit this build plus little change to Lava for test X kind of thing. So it's more iterative, and if we've got the band, you know, obviously we know you have scalability issues and maybe you can't do this a lot, or maybe,
right.
I mean, that's a separate problem, right?
Sure.
But I think we should start thinking about that, because what Lenaro can do, right, is a lot of Lenaro's value add is going to be this validation thing, mm-hmm. and the remote access of units and being able to run tests across units that people don't have. And so being able to make a change that affects 10 units, 10 different, you know, SOCs, and be able to easily test that would be huge, you know, really very useful.
Right.
So anyway,
but this wouldn't be ongoing work. This would be a one-off that you're trying something and want to. This wouldn't be part of some regular tree that you're doing continuous integration testing against.
This would be feed into one of those trees, you know, once you're done with the development. But it's more of, instead of doing a test build in a more of a batch scenario, where in the continuous integration loop, you know, you're doing your development, you push the patch up, the patch gets merged, you do the test, so on and so forth. This is kind of
pre-merge testing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, and it's so yeah. I mean, you might have a build with a hacked up OpenMax component or something.
Sure.
And you're going to want to run some tests on that. Instead of having to pull all those tests out locally, you know, you already have the infrastructure, you already have everything, so why not just push it up, get the results, and
so Lava doesn't know how to do your builds for you. So if you just pushed a patch, it wouldn't know what to do with it.
Right.
And I think that, you know, that's probably not the right place to be doing that. But if you had the result of a build, so if you had some other thing that you could push this into, and say, do this build for me, and here are the same things like we would normally pass to Lava, which in the case of Android is those 3 tarballs.
Right.
Then the pieces that we need are actually the pieces we're working on in the cycle, which would be a scheduler and some command line tools for kicking it off. Initially it'll be command line, eventually we're hoping to have something like a web interface you could do this with as well.
Okay.
But the simplest, earliest thing you would be able to do is through the command line, basically create a job file that would describe, here's where I get the images from, here are the tests that I want to run on it.
Right.
And you would submit that to the scheduler.
Okay.
And then it would take the result of your build and it would run.
Okay.
Those tests.
And I guess there's also you end up wanting to include so that you have a command line tool that feeds something into the build service, waits for the results, and then when the results get back, feeds them into Lava somehow. So you don't want to have to.
Well, I mean, one of those actions can be that it would feed it into the dashboard.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's one of the actions we already have in place.
Oh, right,
So that's not a problem. But
we don't have any structure at all for feeding builds you don't want to have to wait for the build to complete and then remember to go back and say, now run the test on it. Right? You just want to say build it if the build succeeds.
Once it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to think about interface between Android build service and Lava. How build service notifies Lava that build is complete.
Right. And
totally.
that's what we're talking about this afternoon, actually.
So it might be that Lava, sorry for interrupting, it might be that Lava maybe needs to be able to drive the builds directly.
I don't think it needs to drive the builds directly because you have a build system for doing that.
Right.
But the build system needs to notify something in Lava that knows how to kick off those tests. And that's the piece that I was talking about.
Okay.
So, so the way I'm doing that right now is basically by kicking those off directly.
Okay.
When we have a scheduler in place that can handle this, that's the first extra layer that we would need. It could kick those jobs off by submitting a job to the scheduler.
Okay.
The other piece that we're thinking about, and it's probably not as high of a priority because there's an easy way around it, but one of the things that we would like to talk about doing is a driver, for lack of a better term, that would take events. And an event would be, this Android build just finished. But this would be more for stable, continuous builds. This would be for like the daily Monaro build. This would be for like your daily Android builds that you already know what the predefined set of tests are to run on.
Okay.
If it's some one-off that you've got a certain number of tests in mind that you want to run, then you really have to kind of take action to tell it what that is. You can't know that unless you tell it, right?
Mm-hmm. So I think.
So I mean, the only other way I see around that is if, as maybe as part of the build, you submit something that says when you're done, kick off this Lava job.
Right. Or I mean that's kind of all of it. That's kind of the flow where Lava is at the end of the point.
Well, it has to be at the end. You can't test it until it's built.
Well, that's true, but Lava can actually, like, let's say you were doing kind of test-based development where you don't have the images yet. You could have Lava send an event to the build guy. The build guy builds and sends the event back.
So what do you need to tell the build system to start building what you want?
Well, you have a couple of things. You'd either have, well, you actually only have two things.
Okay.
You either have the set of repos that you're pulling, or if you're doing an incremental build, where the current build is. And then the only thing you're not doing there is you're not pulling the build. You already have one, you're just trying to rebuild it to do the rebuild and then retest.
So how do you kick that off? Do you have a command line interface for that, or an API that can be used to do that programmatically? Or?
I think the best way to do it perhaps is, I mean, we do have this nice build system in Android. Of course, you don't want to do it across platform, so don't worry about the Android thing. But maybe the thing is that let's say you do have a remote build that you're working on. You're hacking on the files remotely. What you would do is you would have something like a source build in env.setup that kind of would say, okay, well this build is that would kind of bring stuff into that build environment, bring commands so that you could type, remake, rebuild or retest, whatever, and that would handle that give you that cycle back off, and you'd have all the state because it'd be within the build. And you would say, well, this build got built by with the following environment variables and the following things and the following state, and this thing is hanging out still. This instance is hanging out still, and all I want to do is rebuild it. Well, then I already have all that state in the thing, and I'm just rebuilding one file out of that. So I know that I don't have to re-pull the build or any of that other stuff. I can just type go, and it'll use the current state. So it's in the exact same flow. It's just hooking in at a lower after the sync, really.
Yeah. I mean, if there's an easy way to tell it what you want done,
right,
and to get back from that, here are the URLs of the artifacts from that build
right,
that you need, then it might be possible to create an action in Lava that would kick off your build for you. The trick is going to be taking the result of that and knowing what to do with it.
Because I think
it seems like a kind of backwards way to me. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it seems like...
Well, it is. I mean, it's backwards from the typical. So what would be the point of all this? The point is that instead of doing a batch-based test, which we also have to do, this is an interactive development test.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually sitting there literally coding and testing at the same time.
And if it's already interactive, is it really a big deal to kick off the build and see, okay, my build's done, I'm happy with the results of that, now I want to kick off this test?
Right.
Because it seems to me that if it's interactive already, you kind of want to take some kind of manual step to see that, okay, yeah, I approve of this build.
Right, right. And yeah, that's...
Rather than wait until 15 hours later and see, oh, well, the build wasn't really quite what I wanted, and I ran all these tests. And
right.
I could have done this, hours ago.
Right.
So maybe what's needed is some local command line tools, so engineer can work in his local environment and submit build results to Lava for testing. So he works in his local environment,
right,
then types some command and propose code to Lava.
Well, that's a whole different thing, right?
Do you want your build results in Lava?
For testing.
I mean, that can be done, but I mean...
So Lava is, the other thing about, I'm sorry.
On what level to support this interactive build? In Android build system, it's completely batched, and build is done, working tree is gone. There is no working tree, so you cannot do incremental builds like that, like tweak something and retest.
In Android?
In Android build system.
Oh, in the Android build system, right? You can't do that currently, but it'd be nice to get there with the Android build system to be able to do an incremental build.
Okay, so maybe it should be done instead in a local environment. Because we have conflicting requirements for Android build system. One requirement is to use as little as possible machine time. So build is done, instance is gone, we don't pay for it. Another requirement is
that's true. That's true. So I think that you're very right about that. I mean, in terms of Alexander wanting to minimize, because it's really it's the cost thing, right? It's minimizing the time.
But also it's about the Android build system. I understand it's all about being predictable and clean and building from scratch.
Yes.
And if you want to, for an interactive use case, I think what you should do, the engineer should have access to EC2 on our account and fire up their instance, and just if their local machine isn't powerful enough or whatever, and just do it themselves. It's not like building Android is particularly difficult, right? I mean,
no, but we already.
I'm not sure
the thing
that Android build service provides the value for that use case.
So I guess the issue, right, is that what it does is it means that you can use the same flow for both cases.
Right.
Which is useful.
Yeah,
because I don't have to, then I don't have to document, here's how to set up EC2 and here's how to do all, no, I just do one UI and I say, even if it's something where I'm doing interactive builds and I'm doing a batch build and I get my build and that build kind of hangs out for a little bit, I have my images that got produced and I can say, okay, well, instead of killing the instance, keep it around for a little bit because I want to make this change or something, and then I want to resubmit it into the.
So you can have a hypothetical command line API. You'd say, --bit. You'd say Android build.
Right.
And by default, it would just submit a job to the build service, it would build the instance, it would kill it, and then maybe have the link to download the jobs. But you might say --interactive, and in that case, the job is you'll turn around and we'd be able to SSH in and see if it works.
But you have to make very sure to kill it when you're done.
Well, actually,
that's a useful feature, and then from from the client customer's point of view, that seems perfectly reasonable. The way it's done at the moment, that's quite a big change, right? But not particularly easy to do. I think it would be possible there.
So I'll take
just a bit weird.
So I'll take a user story to actually create that user story a little bit better, and I'll sync up with Alexander, and we'll decide because he has told me like oh, they're keeping all these Jenkins sessions around and it's costing us lots of money, and so I can appreciate that. And I mean, there are other ways, right? Like if you look at like Electric Commander, where you actually host the build locally and you're sending it into the cloud to build cloud, right? Your own cloud. But I think that having an interactive, based off the Android development I've done, especially when we get into having all of these different targets, to test a change across all those builds. What people tend to do, which is even worse, is they use the code review process to do it. So they'll make a change, but then to test it across all the builds, they'll actually submit it through the entire code review process. Even if they're trying to do like an interactive development, it just takes forever to do that cycle. So to be able to just take the test out of that cycle and just do that, and then once it's all ready to go, then submit those results, then submit it to the code review, and then have it do one final build, because what that final build is going to be the merge results and how this change plays with everybody else. But I've seen people use and abuse the Android build system to do this interactive batch build because it's so useful. You have this huge setup that it's too useful not to have that. And so anyway, that's where this idea has come from personally. I was going to say something else, but anyway. So I have a couple of action items from this. I'm going to use the story to define define interactive builds. So anyway, back to CI. We have 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. So we will also do the deployment for testing our target. So this job can also be done with Lava. Yeah. So Lava can be the tool for integrate the whole process. And aside from the Lava, we have a tool which is we download and enjoy media that can be used to partition the SD card and during the format we install the table we have to put everything to the SD card for manually testing.
So one thing we should add, I'd like to add for the Linaro Android Media Create is a method to actually do NFS TFTP booting. So you can, or NFS mount your kernel and root file system so that it's a little easier to debug, because if you don't do that, then you're doing this awful switching the SD card out a million times, and that's just slow. But we can change, but we have to change, but that's where the boot args get written. So, and that'll change from build to build. So you can either hook in at the U-boot level and change them in your environment when you're doing development, but it might be nice for the Linaro Android to just take a take an IP address as a switch, and that IP address is where you're running your NFS. Maybe it takes that. Maybe it takes the actual the actual path of where your root file system is, where your IP address is, and where your kernel is. So just to as a convenience thing.
Yeah. For local environment, yeah.
Right.
We can do it with lots of ways to fit ourselves. Also,
and that is more of a usability thing, because I know, yeah, it's easy, and yeah, it's easy, but you know, it's kind of the thing that not a lot of people. It's nicer to have it through Linaro Android image tools, because that's the standard interface you use anyway. So if we can extend that, we can maybe hide some of those details, and Wolfgang won't get nasty or won't get emails about how to do it. That's a bad thing. Okay.
After down the deployment, we may would like to define what validation we'd like to do to test the images. Okay, so we'd like to validation after the image building because we need to make sure there will be no regression happen, and we'd like to test if the function works as our expect. Maybe we can do some testing for multimedia and for graphics, so that we may also want to trigger a performance validation, or like a CTS, Android CTS compatibility test suite validation, to make sure our image is improving as our expect.
So let's stop right there, because that's a good way to open this up. So these Android devices are multimedia devices. So being able to test multimedia is actually a pretty important thing. So what are our thoughts? Does anybody have any thoughts on how we can test video, graphics, audio, all of the lovely things that these Android devices can do? And I know that somebody...
That's not platform specific. No matter whether you're talking about Android or anything else. I mean,
this will actually, yeah, it'll be important for Ubuntu, right? As we move Ubuntu onto...
I've seen some hacky solutions before for taking your audio out, plugging it into your microphone jack, and playing something and making sure that it came out the way that you thought it did. But stuff like that's very fragile.
So I'm guessing Paul has taken an action item.
No, I have no idea.
Okay.
I just learned this at lunch yesterday, didn't we? He didn't seem amazingly interested in this kind of thing, like in being able to, get the frame buffer or whatever on your, seeing what the frame buffer is on a remote instance. He didn't seem to view remote validation of multimedia for correctness. Performance, yes, but not correctness. He just didn't think it was worth a bother.
My experience is that correctness, you have to use what we call a validation string test. In previous life, what I have experienced is, for example, like MPEG-2, there's something called a Ocelot testing library. You had to pay about, I think, 50,000 to buy that library. But the big code inside is all pre-validated with decoding images. So you run through your system, and then you take all the output from your frame buffer and do web-based comparison, and it will show how accurate your decode is. The similar test exists for both type 1, 2, 4, and I'm not sure about other codecs.
That's actually that's a good point. I don't think we need that high fidelity testing for Linaro.
In recent examples is, there were some SoC vendors claiming they were able to decode certain bit rates. It happens in H.264, but in fact, they were skipping decoding frames, so the image quality come out as visibly to the end user that decoding is incomplete.
Were you able to detect that with the automated testing tool?
Yes.
That's cool.
The thing is that in graphic or in the video world, typically if you can fake that human eye cannot detect it, you've done a good job, right? Because you don't necessarily have to decode everything to death.
Right.
But if the error is visible to the end user, then it's not something acceptable.
So perhaps the thing to do is, and maybe this goes back to the interactive build, is it's nice, we will have all this equipment, we will have all this set up. Is it worth putting together a way to have users be able to view multimedia output on their remote system that they're trying to work with? And can that just be a camera and a mic? I mean, it's hacky, but we're not really testing MPEG correctness necessarily as more than we're just testing like software basic functionality.
One thing is that you cannot use camera, and the other thing is that I have experienced that software code errors because of omission and data types that cause decoding truncations. So it's supposed to decode all the AC terms. Instead, before they complete all the AC term decoding, it truncated, and then the image count was incorrect. Right. Purely due to software, nothing to do with the underlying hardware. Everything is perfect. It's just like the software screwed up.
So if you had something to see that right, you would want that. You would want the ability to actually look and see and examine the, right. Even though yes, correct. You do all your software testing, it comes out correct. So you would want to see something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're really using the camera, because a lot of times this type of things is that you need to look very closely to the screen to actually see the defect. Using the camera remotely, I'm not too sure you can detect those.
Oh, so the idea is that you can't, since the camera is effectively subsampling the output, you're going to miss it because you're not going to hit that particular frame or whatever.
You're not able to detect by human eyes.
Yeah.
Remotely through the whole internet.
Okay.
This is traditionally one of those type things that is really insanely hard to do in an automated way, but something that a human can do in 10 seconds. And so
sure. So maybe there's a middle ground there where, if you just want to, maybe it's a smoke test, that's it, or it's just a quick like, do graphics look rational kind of thing. And you'd actually have to run this all the way through. Yeah. Yeah, and then it's kind of cool. People can log on. They can write "Hello World" and then they can see it pop up. And I mean, there is some use to that, right? You're having a little bit of feedback. So
it seems like it's a separate session.
Yeah.
From multimedia, multimedia.
Well, there is one side, right? No, it's a good discussion, right? Because you say, do you try to test multimedia in a continuous integration? The answer in this session is no.
Right.
So the separate session is more of a interactive session, and then that's a separate. But like in an Oneiric, it's a separate session to talk about that. So okay.
I do have a question about the validation tools for Android and everything. A couple of things, actually. First of all, are you happy with the current way we're doing it to have all of these as like separate actions and separate test suites, or is it even feasible to come up with something like an Android-based test execution framework that would install on the Android device, and then you can talk to run all of these tests like CTS or Monkey or whatever it is that you're running? Is that something that y'all consider doing, and you would basically just have an allow action to run this test suite and tell it to run this test and you do the result back?
We have many kinds of tests like Monkey and CTS.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're all separate from one another. There's no test execution framework that knows how to run all of them, but you can just talk to that one single point and have it run whatever you want. The current way we're doing this is to use ADB to launch each of these things individually, which means you've got to, for each one of those, you've got to handle interpreting that, parsing it, the results separately. Has there been any thought to having something like an Oneiric for for Android.
Something you can install locally and it
Sure,
does
and it knows how to run
summary.
whatever test suite you care about.
Right.
And you just add support for your test suite to that harness.
I guess what's the big thing you're solving? I mean, yeah, you have more compute on the other end, but at least it's all in one place.
It gives you a single point of contact for easily being able to run these tests and possibly even parse the results for you and get them into a format that you can consume for the automation.
Okay, well, it's an interesting thing.
It's not something you want to put in Lava because then you can't run it locally. It's much harder to make locally, right?
Right. So the current way we're doing this in Lava through what you've been working on is that each of these things gets run separately. And then you have to, that means they all have to get handled in a different way. So if you want to add a new test for Android, you've got to do yet another Lava action and yet another piece for parsing the results in Lava. So this will do this one time in this Android test suite and handle it there.
But then you're just pushing the problem around because then you're going to have to do it in the Android test.
Kind of, but I mean, at least you've got one place to do it kind of uniformly rather than just hacking up a different solution every single time in Lava.
So I was thinking about if we can.
It gives you a single interface. So for instance, let's approach this differently.
Yeah.
So for instance, going back to your use case earlier of, hey, I've got something that I've built a one-off and I want to submit a test to Lava to test my new Android build. And
right.
These are the tests that I want to run. So on a Ubuntu-based run image, there would be two actions you would get to Lava. One to tell it, these are the tests that I want to install. And the only reason you have to do that separately is because we need to install them ahead of time before we reboot into the image.
Okay.
Because I make no assumptions about the networking working when we boot it into the test image.
Right.
But I still want to be able to run tests. And then a second one to say, yes, go ahead and actually run all of those tests that I did before. In Android, it would be a separate action for every single test you want to run with its own parameters and everything else.
Okay.
Whereas with the Ubuntu Oneiric images, it would just be a single interface. Run the test suite. Here's the test to run.
Okay, so instead of having, all right, I see what the issue is. So instead of having Lava be the test framework, you have a single instance.
Right, it's kicking off.
Single APK that you install and use it go.
Right.
Okay.
Possibly more than one APK, because I mean you would want to install the test, but I mean, it could potentially even know how to install those for you. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe that's a little bit tricky on Android because in Ubuntu we can just root into it and do our thing.
Sure.
I don't know that you really have something you can do that with in Android.
Well, you'd have to have the image up.
Well, in Android we assume the networking works anyway.
Oh, okay.
We use ADB to talk to it.
Well, so then what you do is you just do ADB, install APK test, and go from there. Just kick them off just like you would normally do.
Right.
Okay.
The other
action item to do test aggregation.
Yeah, it's just something to consider. Right? I mean, it's not a big deal for me, but I think it might be something useful to you.
Yeah.
I think you want to have. So you can imagine a workflow where you have a Panda sitting next to you, so you take one of the tests on the Panda, and then you want to run tests on everything else, but you want the way you present the information locally in remote to be similar.
Right.
I think it'll be much easier to maintain over time.
Yeah, and if you have the test built in with the build, it helps, because they're there, and that's anyway the Android model anyway.
So the other thing I wanted to ask about, he's not here unfortunately, but Bobby from ARM we were talking in the power management discussion. They've got these tools for doing power management testing, and it involves some specialized hardware and everything else. But on the Android side, and the Ubuntu side, they use something to kick off the test remotely called Bespoke.
Bespoke?
I have no idea what it is. I was hoping you had heard of it. But I mentioned to him that in the Android level support, we're using ADB to launch the test remotely. And he said no, that they decided against that because this was better for some reason. So I was wondering if y'all heard that. If not, then it would be a good idea for all of us to.
Yeah, well, I asked Bobby to schedule a session.
So yeah, we've got another session to talk about that, but if y'all knew exactly what that was and had an opinion about it, I thought it would be good.
You know what Bespoke is? Have you heard of Bespoke?
Bespoke, I don't know that.
Okay.
So we'll talk about it.
It's probably what they need to really probably highly tailored to their needs.
Right. Maybe it's a power management test framework for Android or something weird.
He seemed to think that it was actually more generic, so I don't know. We can talk to him about it too.
Okay. All right, so I have a couple of action items that have come out of this, mostly related to things that are not related to this session, but I'll spawn off several things to deal with that. Although I do think that they're sort of related, because if you can solve the interactive build problem, the interactive build problem is a more generic problem than the batch build problem. And they kind of go through the same flow, so I think it's at least worth looking at those things, especially maybe hooking in after it builds. So I kind of, I'll calcify these action items a little bit better. But we have changes to our Android image. We've got test aggregation to look into that. Let's see what else is on there. And just generic, yeah. So, okay.
So I have a question regarding the CTS validation. What's your guys targeted? Are you guys targeting 100% passing rate?
Well, yeah, but.
Are you sure you can reach it with the developer platform you have?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, the nice thing is, right, is we're not trying to. I don't know if we're going to try to get out of the gate with total CTS validation. Obviously, it would be great because members could take that and use that to get market certification ASAP, and it would help everybody out. So, right, it's a target, but I don't know if 100% pass rate is going to happen without, you know, vendor help and a few other helps.
So on the Enjoy side, are you guys actually getting the Enjoy changes from all the vendors and then try to merge into your source code? Because I'm asking about the Enjoy user space side, not the kernel side. Understanding the kernel side, you guys trying to do one kernel for all. But what about the Enjoy side, the middleware, multimedia systems, the graphic systems?
Yeah, I mean, we have the idea is that we take AOSP and we run that. Of course, that's just for reference.
You take an AOSP, which is more on the more on the like open source like website type things.
Right.
So
but are we gonna pull in all the vendors' changes to the user space to pass CTS? Is your question?
Yes.
I don't know. It's a good question. I'll make a note about it.
Yeah, it's very complex because we need to make the generic part aside from the hardware specific part in the user space. Yeah.
But when you try to do a product, the first thing comes to a OEM mind is like how well you optimize your multimedia system, your graphic system, stuff.
No, you're right. You're right. It's not like we have abstraction to work to lean on. Okay, I made a note of it. All right, we have one more minute.
I would like to raise a question that we should define build artifacts in more detail, because one last issue I faced is need for this route for Android toolchain build. So we want to think what build artifacts we need from Android related builds.
Okay. One thing I would like to bring up in this session, and I'd actually like somebody to take an action item about looking at it, is we're going to have this matrix of support. Right? I can do Bluetooth, I can do I2C, I can do all these other things. It'd be great if that matrix was actually fed from the build result, the test results. automatically.
Mm-hmm.
So,
There's a session on that, I think, later in the week.
okay, for the star system stuff?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, you guys are gonna, because the idea is that you have this big matrix with, here's all the boards, here's all the support, we do check marks or the NAs or anyway, and then we have this nice mapping between that and, so you guys are gonna talk about that?
There's a session on it, yeah.
Okay. Star system. All right, cool. That's it. Thanks, everyone.